Well, good morning, everyone. Can I start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the country on which we stand and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Can I acknowledge our federal Labor leader, Anthony Albanese. John Battens, our ALP State President. Julianne Campbell, our State Secretary. Didn't she run a great campaign? Zach Beers, our Assistant State Secretary. Can I acknowledge my good friend, our wonderful Deputy Premier, Stephen Miles. Our Treasurer, Cameron Dick. The Best Education Minister, Grace. To my wonderful Cabinet colleagues, everyone please stand up. This is a mighty team. And all of our caucus members. There's a few more than 7 where we started, if you remember. Can I acknowledge the mighty trade union movement? Delegates, life members, ladies and gentlemen. Friends, the people of Queensland have returned a Labor government again to this state. In a trying time, faced with our greatest peacetime emergency, the people of Queensland put their faith and trust in Labor, and they did it in greater numbers than ever before. And we have all of you to thank for it. People who have never voted Labor in their lives turned to Labor for the very first time to keep them safe. And today I pledge to those Queenslanders, I will work every day to keep your trust. In Labor, the people of this state found a government they could count on. The people of Queensland put faith and trust in Labor, and they turned away from the LNP. With new members in Palmerston, in Caloundra, in Nicklin, in Hervey Bay and in Bundaberg. And across this state, the LNP vote went backwards. They were dangerously wrong, like calling for the borders to be open 64 times. That's 64 times the LNP was willing to put the lives of Queenslanders at risk. COVID doesn't give you a second chance to make a wrong decision, let alone 64 of them. Some may be tempted to say the faces have changed, but it's still the same LNP. Except the faces haven't changed. It's the old LNP now more than ever. Let's see, we've had Campbell Newman, Lawrence Springborg, Tim Nichols, Deb Frecklington, and now we have some other guy. Enough leaders to sink a yacht. The same people who put a hammer to our healthcare, who kicked the frail and old out of aged care, who closed and sold off our schools in our state. Where would this state be during the pandemic without the nurses and doctors and hospital staff that the LNP sacked and we restored? Friends, I want to talk to you today about a really important matter: regional quarantine. Our hotels were simply not designed to be quarantine centres. We cannot expect CBD hotels to be our last line of defence against a virus that has brought havoc around the rest of the world. Thousands of Australians are still stranded overseas, and they need to be brought home safely. Business and the community deserve certainty as well. And in the absence of a national quarantine plan from the Prime Minister, I put forward a common-sense proposal to quarantine people in Toowoomba and quarantine them adjacent to an international airport. Our hotels were not made to contain infectious diseases. A regional quarantine centre could be built right now with the planes landing next door if only Scott Morrison could answer a simple question: do you support it or not? Our quarantine centre would help stranded Australians get back from overseas, allow some Pacific Island labour to help our farmers, and give our universities a small cohort of students who would also help our tourism and hospitality industries. Jobs are at stake. Victoria is okay. Why not Queensland? Friends, we are not proposing construction of an international space station. These are reasonably basic structures, but they can provide the safety and certainty our country needs now. If they're good enough for the Northern Territory and Melbourne, then they're good enough for Queensland as well. And the message from the community is clear. It's a no-brainer. Get on with it. Now Scott Morrison wants to set his own Commonwealth criteria. Interesting, as a quarantine is a Commonwealth responsibility. If you set the criteria, you can design it, you can construct it, you can build it, you can operate it, and you can own it, because the fact is quarantine is a federal government responsibility. Friends, the ongoing pandemic has shown the value of people you can count on. People who say what they mean and mean what they say. People who can deliver. Everyone knows the federal government's vaccine rollout is dependent on supply. Vaccine supplies have been too little, too late. The state government is not responsible for vaccinating the general population, essentially our workforce. But in order to keep Queenslanders safe, we have to do what the federal government has not been able to do. Starting today, we are prioritising residential aged care and disability workers at our vaccination hubs, with over 3,000 already registered. We want to protect those who protect our most vulnerable in our state. Today, we have opened 18 vaccine hubs, including the Rockley Showgrounds and Logan Entertainment Centre. Together with existing hospital clinics, this will mean more places where Queenslanders aged 40 to 49 can register to get their Pfizer jabs. We want to vaccinate as many Queenslanders as possible, but it's essential to book to avoid queues. Older Queenslanders should still go to their GP for advice. If there is any silver lining to the experience in Melbourne, it is in showing us how fragile our system is. The pandemic is far from over. Friends, today we should also take time to reflect on our strong Labor record, keeping Queenslanders safe, rebuilding our economy, training our people, growing our regions. I am pleased to be joined here today with my fantastic team, my Cabinet and caucus colleagues. It is their achievements that are making Queensland a better and fairer place. Achievements including introducing industrial manslaughter laws, the first state in the nation to do so. Introducing the nation's first paid domestic and family violence leave. Australia's first labour hire licensing scheme. Embarking on a path to treaty. Air conditioning Queensland classrooms and libraries and staff rooms. Banning plastics, protecting our waterways and oceans. Delivering 140 recommendations of the Not Now, Not Ever report. Establishing an anti-cyberbullying task force. Legislating to prevent wage theft in this state. Expanding and improving TAFE. Free apprenticeships for our young. Improving mine safety. Expanding wild dog fencing, bringing back our sheep industry in Queensland. Good on you, Mark Berner, the farmer's friend. Works for Queensland, creating thousands of jobs in communities across Queensland, establishing CleanCo to provide cheaper, cleaner energy and creating more jobs, establishing a biofuels industry, establishing a brand new hydrogen industry, gender parity in government boards, protecting and redeveloping the Gold Coast Spit for future generations. Friends, introducing historic legislation to allow voluntary assisted dying in this state. I made a commitment at the election to do it, and I introduced it in the last sitting of parliament. Expanding our light rail, and in a few weeks' time, hopefully securing the 2032 Olympic and Paralympic Games in Queensland. This would be transformational. It will deliver billions of dollars worth of job-creating infrastructure projects right across our state. Friends, because we've kept Queenslanders safe, it's meant our economy recovery is well underway. We're putting $11 billion into supporting more jobs and more industries, reinvesting in schools and hospitals and services. Our economic recovery plan invests in the infrastructure our growing state wants, providing the jobs people need. And we stand beside those industries and businesses still battling the effects of the pandemic. We are a government that builds, and above all, we are a government that builds jobs. Our next budget is a Labor jobs budget. It's backing our frontline services with 5,800 more nurses, 1,500 more doctors, 475 more paramedics, 6,190 new teachers and 1,100 teacher aides. We will build 7 new satellite hospitals, bringing healthcare closer to where people live in this state. In addition, there are major upgrades in hospitals in Cairns, Townsville, Rockhampton, Logan, the Gold Coast and Caboolture and Ipswich. And just last week I announced a new public hospital in Springfield. This partnership with the Mater Hospital will add a further 174 beds in one of the fastest growing parts of our state. And last week, with our Health Minister, Yvette Darth, I opened a hospital in Roma. Their first hospital, as the Treasurer and Deputy Premier remind me, was built by a Labor Premier, William Forgan Smith. And this brand new hospital was built by the Palaszczuk Labor government in Roma. We are a government for all of Queenslanders, no matter where you live. During this term, we will add 800 more beds across the state because we believe Queenslanders deserve very good health care no matter where they live. Friends, part of Labor's story is taking care of people. You see it in every member of this great party. You see it in the member for Stretton, Duncan Pegg. In Duncan, we have a true community champion. I know you join with me in offering our very best to Duncan during this very difficult time. Duncan is someone who has shown how politics can unite us. Duncan's own story is a Labor story. His family believes in the twin golden tickets to a brighter future, hard work and a good, decent education. Duncan is a proud product of the state education system, which continues to provide working families with the enduring goal that each generation will have more opportunities than the one before it. During my term as Premier, we have built 18 new schools in Queensland. Three will open in 2022. And today I can announce that in the next state budget we will fund the construction of 10 more schools to open in 2023-2024. The next state budget builds on our economic recovery. It's a jobs budget. It builds back better than we had before the pandemic, with more jobs and a stronger economy. more jobs, more industries, more manufacturing, which means more full-time secure jobs. More made in Queensland, making everything from tanks in Ipswich to trains in Maryborough. High-tech unmanned aircraft and medical devices and innovations. We will invest to build on our traditional strengths of mining, tourism and agriculture. We will invest more for renewable energy. We will invest more for training and skills so both older and younger workers can get better paid, decent jobs. We will invest more in affordable housing across this state. We will invest more to fight domestic violence and crime. We will invest more to restoring the bonds of respect and dignity for our First Nations people. We will invest more for our roads and our transport. It is a true Labor budget to be proud of, and I'm proud that it is being delivered by my good friend Cameron Dick. We look forward to it, Cameron. So, friends, can I thank you all for coming along today? It's wonderful to see you all here. Isn't it great to be part of our wonderful Labor movement in this state? Isn't it wonderful to be amongst friends? Haven't we come a long way from those 7 members where we started back to now a third-term historic Labor government? And I am proud of every single person in this room, and I am proud of every single person in this state. And in conclusion, let me say this. Our government will continue to fight for you. Our government will continue to work for you. Our government will continue to protect you. Our government will continue to care for you. A Labor government offers so much hope and opportunity to people. We will not let people stand by. We will not let people fall through the cracks. We will walk with you side by side each and every day, because a Labor government cares, a Labor government makes sure we protect our values, and a Labor government gets on with the job and looks after the people right across our state. Friends, thank you very much for coming along today. And it is now my pleasure, thank you, and it is now my great pleasure to introduce another good friend of Queensland, our federal leader, Anthony Albanese. Please make him welcome.
Well, what a great honour to be introduced by a great Labor Premier, Annastacia Palaszczuk. Can I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. Can I acknowledge Annastacia Palaszczuk and her magnificent Labor team in the Queensland Government. Can I acknowledge the state officials who are here, led by Jules and John and Zach? And can I also acknowledge the National President of the Australian Labor Party, another great Queenslander, Wayne Swan. And Paul Erickson, our National Secretary. To all of my Queensland Federal Labor team, we have the quality, we just need additional quantity. And to the great trade union movement here in Queensland, it was a great honour to spend May Day here with you just a month ago. True believers, one and all, delegates from all over the state of Queensland and the great Queensland trade union movement. My friend, the Premier, Annastacia Palaszczuk, and I have come a long way since we served as Infrastructure Minister together at the same time. As the last state election confirmed, you are, if there was any doubt, a Labor legend. As the records show, you are now Australia's longest-serving female head of government. With you and your team in charge, Queensland has been in very good hands during some really tough times. And Queenslanders recognised this when they went to the ballot box. What an emphatic result. I was heartened because I want Queensland to keep going from strength to strength. And the best way for that to happen is with a Labor government. You all know my equation by now. I love Queensland 365 days a year and 362 nights. I don't waver for 3 of those nights. One of them that I'll be with the Premier in Townsville on Wednesday. And it's a great thing that genuine footy supporters in North Queensland have been rewarded with the State of Origin. But I have always been firm about the footy. I came out of the womb with a red eye and a green eye. I don't change codes and I don't change teams. By way of contrast, I give you Scott Morrison. There's something about Queensland that really seems to set him off. He bags you while he talks up his home state of New South Wales. Even when he crosses the Tweed, he continues to bag you. Maybe he can't stand being reminded that it was a federal Labor government with a Queensland Prime Minister and a Queensland Treasurer that protected Australia from the global financial crisis. But maybe, just maybe, it's actually more fundamental than that. He hasn't forgiven Queensland for giving Australia the great Labor Party. Or maybe Queensland is just so far outside his narrow vision that it confuses him. It probably shouldn't come as a surprise that during the recent debate about quarantine, he couldn't tell the difference between Toowoomba and Batuta. He thinks the planes have to go to Brisbane, even though the hint is in the name of Wellcamp Airport. There's an airport there. He's landed there in his own large plane.
That's right.
It seems he's forgotten about Toowoomba Base Hospital too. But Premier Palaszczuk stands in such contrast because Premier Palaszczuk, as we've heard yet again today, has had to step up time and time again to fill the void left by Scott Morrison. Again today, the Premier has announced she is stepping up to vaccinate aged care workers and disability care workers who this government said would all be vaccinated by Easter. In the face of a Prime Minister who doesn't hold a hose and doesn't think this is a race, Queensland under Annastacia has taken the tough decisions on borders and on vaccinating workers. Now we see a real plan for quarantine dismissed without examination and a last-minute rule change splashed across this morning's papers, even though it makes perfect sense to build a dedicated quarantine facility right here in Queensland. But Scott Morrison's response to the proposal is to pick a fight. Now take a guess who I've got my money on. Queenslanders have many qualities. One is an unparalleled talent for combining wisdom with brutal efficiency. Exhibit A, the way you turfed out the Newman government after just one term. And since then, Queenslanders have voted for Labor in ever greater numbers. 3 terms in, Queenslanders have seen their collective wisdom paying dividends. And I want to translate the support for Queensland Labor here at the state level to the federal level. I want it to be clear that the best choice for your great state is a Labor government in Canberra working with Annastacia Palaszczuk and her team here in Queensland. A federal government that ensures Queensland's voice is prominent in the nation's capital, and that will include a second Queensland-based Treasurer in recent times, that of my friend Jim Chalmers. A federal government that looks to Queensland's rich catalogue of achievements and is inspired by it. A federal government that draws strength from the mighty union movement and understands, as your members do, that we will always be at our best when unions and business work together. And the way to make that happen is with Labor. At a federal level, the LNP now have the unhappy distinction of standing for nothing, believing in nothing, delivering nothing. A government that had just 2 jobs this year, quarantine and vaccination, and they've botched them both. A government that only responds once there is an absolute crisis, but never, ever provides leadership. Scott Morrison owes it to the Australian people to be open and transparent. Instead, it's all smirk and mirrors. And it is only when it is called out that we get a glimpse, a troubling glimpse, of the real Scott Morrison, a man whose failures have caused real damage to the health of his fellow Australians, to businesses and to the economy. He's counting on Australians to forget that his government has been in power for 8 long years. 8 long years and no positive legacy, acting like an opposition in exile on the government benches. Now, when I had the honour of serving as Deputy Prime Minister, I was acting Prime Minister on a couple of occasions for a period of days. Scott Morrison has been acting Prime Minister every day since 2018. A government without a sense of purpose other than just occupying the space. Even the budget they handed down last month had no plans for reform, no long-term vision, no legacy beyond a debt so huge that it will cast a shadow for generations to come. And what commitment did Queenslanders get out of the budget? The lowest per-person rate of infrastructure spending in the country. Dead last. That's where Scott Morrison puts Queenslanders. Now compare that with the last time I worked with Annastacia Palaszczuk when we were both infrastructure ministers in our respective governments. We delivered every day, from the Cape York Roads package, the Townsville Ring Road, the Mackay Ring Road, Calliope Crossroads, Yeppoon Floodplain, the Bruce Highway upgrades, Koroy to Curra, Warrego Highway, and of course, with Yvette Darth's encouragement, it must be said, Redcliffe Rail. First promised way back in 1895. But it took federal and state Labor working together to make it a rail line that today commuters are riding on. And then I do want to mention one important project, a project that's now fully funded by the Palaszczuk government without a red cent from Canberra, and that's Cross River Rail. It would have been opened now. The federal money was in the budget, billions of dollars of it. Who said you can't get in the way of a bucket of money and premiers? I think Paul Keating hadn't met Campbell Newman when he made that comment. Because it was cancelled by the LNP in Canberra and Campbell Newman but Annastacia Palaszczuk is getting on with the job of building it. So, friends, this is a federal government that takes Queensland for granted. And soon they'll be asking the Australian people to give them another term. The only thing that another term of this government would guarantee is a lost decade for Australia. It doesn't have to be this way. As Queensland has consistently shown by example, Labor offers a clear alternative. It's 130 years since the trade union movement took the struggles of working Australians from the shearing sheds and the factory floor onto the floor of parliaments. Labor's flame burns brightly, lighting the path ahead. As the only party that understands and uses the power of government to change people's lives for the better, Labor remains the most powerful vehicle for progress and reform in this country. All of it powered by an ambition for our nation and a deep, unwavering faith in our fellow Australians. But Labor haven't even waited to get back into government to make a difference. What Labor has done during the pandemic has dragged the LNP out of their slumber and towards action. We've offered constructive solutions, such as wage subsidies, which Scott Morrison initially dismissed as very dangerous. And just as Labor values have been the right ones for the crisis, they will be the right ones for the recovery. It's something the LNP admitted in their actions, if not their words. Look at the way they scrambled to come up with their own childcare policy after we announced ours in last year's budget reply. Labor knew it would be good for families, good for children, good for business and good for our economy. The coalition dismissed it. Then in their budget last month, they came up with a half-baked childcare policy that we know they'll never deliver on. What the Treasurer hasn't worked out is that if you perform half a backflip, you fall flat on your face. Labor's guided by three principles: an economy that delivers for working families, investing in Australia's future, and making sure that everyone can get ahead. No one is left behind. These three principles will drive our plans and policies to secure a better future, to improve living standards and promote fairness. Every policy and principle I've announced since becoming leader is a way for Australia to build back stronger, to seize that once-in-a-century opportunity the pandemic has given us. Part of that opportunity is to take advantage of the movement of Australians out of the capital cities and into our regions. It makes sense for governments to nurture regionalisation. This government has killed off public service jobs in the regions, job that represents vital services like Medicare and Centrelink. Federal public sector jobs in regional Queensland have been cut by 10%. In Townsville, that figure is almost 15%. The federal government's approach is the opposite of smart regionalisation, which calls for genuine investment, serious policy making, proper consultation and determined implementation. It calls for education and health services being up to scratch and able to cope with the growing population, which is especially significant in Queensland as a destination for so many interstate migrants. And it calls for the urgent tackling of the housing affordability problem that is growing in many parts of the country. The fact is that what we need to do is to consider the alternative. The fact is, under this government, we've lost 90,000 jobs in manufacturing. They drove car manufacturing offshore. And in Queensland, the Newman government bought trains from overseas rather than building them here. And then those trains had to be made fit for purpose by, you guessed it, Queensland workers. They're doing it here. They're doing it right now in Maryborough. I'm no stranger to down at EDI up there, where the new gen rolling stock trains imported by the Newman government are being repaired and fixed by skilled Queenslanders. A federal Labor government would back the skills of those workers and the vision of Queensland Labor with a national rail manufacturing plan. Meanwhile, a great Queensland success story is getting on with the job of creating the future. Brisbane-based Tritium developed and is exporting the technology to recharge electric vehicles. Their charging stations are the fastest and best in the world. They're fuelling the shift to EVs in Europe and North America. Their chargers are used by companies like Ford, Volkswagen, Harley-Davidson and Daimler. The problem isn't that the Conservatives are stuck in the past, it's that they want the rest of Australia to go back there and keep them company. We believe in ensuring Queensland's traditional industries have a future. Mining, for example, makes up almost 12% of Queensland's economy. Queensland's huge coal and bauxite reserves are of such high quality they are and will remain highly sought overseas. But we also know it's crucial to back emerging industries, and in many cases the new industries are being supported by our traditional ones. For example, it takes more than 200 tonnes of met coal to produce one wind turbine. According to forecasts of global growth in wind power capacity in 2030, Australia could be exporting 15.5 million tonnes of coking coal to build these turbines. This is the equivalent of 3 years' output from the Moranbah North coking coal mine in Queensland. Meanwhile, Queensland's abundance of sunshine and wind resources and your massive opportunities in hydrogen will be key to Australia realising its potential as a renewable energy superpower. It is a reality recognised by industry. Sun Metals zinc refinery in Townsville is just one example. They're the second biggest energy user in Queensland. Backed by solar and hydrogen, they plan to convert to 100% renewables by 2040. Labor wants to be at the forefront of the clean energy revolution. A government I lead will establish the Rewiring the Nation project, based upon the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, to power the power grid that the 21st century demands. We'll establish a national reconstruction fund to diversify our industrial base, drive regional economic development, create secure jobs and develop our sovereign capability. We'll establish Jobs and Skills Australia to fill the gaps that are holding us back, the gaps that have grown under this government. Since they were elected, the number of traineeships and apprenticeships in North Queensland alone have been cut by more than 30%. There is so much more that can be done. You wouldn't pick it from Scott Morrison's photo ops, but the largest contribution to the Queensland economy has been from healthcare and the services sector. It's grown by 66% over the past decade, and an ageing population means it'll keep growing. If we invest in our care workforce in training, in research, in giving our workers the best tools and equipment, we can end up exporting the knowledge and expertise the world is crying out for. Then there's tourism. Queensland spoils you for choice, I've got to say, when it comes to reasons for visit. It's no surprise that the sector employed more than 145,000 people directly in the last full financial year before the pandemic. And yet, the federal government has left it without help and without certainty, left in the lurch by a man determined to be the Prime Minister for New South Wales. The LNP has no future vision for our nation, no ambition, just a plan to get through to the next election. Then we can see, of course, austerity budgets coming in. They'll have discovered debt. Their budget foreshadowed already a reduction in wages, low growth, low productivity and lower workforce participation. Having had no plan for their first 3 terms, it's unsurprising they don't have one for their 4th. Just continuing to manage political problems that they've created and treating taxpayers' funds as though they are the LNP's funds. This is a government that's out of time, out of ideas, and at the next election it should be out of office. But friends, as we look to a future beyond the pandemic, we do have an incredible opportunity. If you want to reinvent our economy as one that works for people, not the other way around. Labor is on your side. If you want to lift wages and make sure they keep rising, Labor is on your side. If you want secure work, Labor is on your side. If you want people doing the same job, getting the same pay in our mines and other workplaces, Labor is on your side. If you want to build things in this country by reviving manufacturing, Labor is on your side. And if you want Australia to emerge as a renewable energy superpower, Labor is on your side. If you want to turn the scientific breakthroughs of our brightest minds into the products and services that will generate economic and social benefits for decades to come, Labor is on your side. And if you want to have a national project that repairs our vet system with public TAFE at its heart, Labor is on your side. And if you want a Labor legacy along with universal superannuation and universal health care through Medicare, of universal provision of affordable childcare, Labor is on your side. If you want to fix aged care, Labor is on your side. And if you want to address housing affordability, Labor is on your side. It should be of no surprise that a government that began with Tony Abbott as its Women's Minister has had a few issues. Does anyone think that they would have had a women's budget statement were it not for the issues that have occurred with the brave Brittany Higgins calling them out this year? But if you want to champion equality for women and a government that has 50% of its cabinet as women, Labor is on your side. And if you think that we should be proud of living with the oldest continuous civilisation on the planet, and think that First Nations people deserve a voice to Parliament and the full recognition of the Uluru Statement from the Heart, Labor is on your side. We will get it done. And it will be a very proud moment. So my message to Australians is simply this: you deserve what Queenslanders already have. A government that breaks records, that imagines a better future for our nation and creates it. A government that's on your side, a government that works for you, a government that is on Queensland's side, the power of federal Labor and state Labor working in the interests of Queenslanders and working in the interests of our great nation. I look forward to campaigning with you and coming back next year as leader of a federal Labor government.